Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today for the next part of our High Tunnel and Greenhouse Construction webinar series. My name is Kerry Rivard. I'm a extension specialist here at Kansas State University, and really happy you're here to join us today. We have a great feature speaker, one of our local experts on high tunnel and greenhouse construction, Mr. Mark Gawron. And so we're excited to have Mark here to talk to us a little bit about greenhouse siting and layout. Before we get going, just a couple of housekeeping things. We do want to give a shout out to the USDA NIFA Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Grant Program, BFRDP as it's known. That's the organization that's funding this webinar series, so we really appreciate that. And also, if you are interested in learning more, you can use this QR code to get signed up for our newsletter. And so you'll get more um, notifications about webinars that happen through the rest of the year and really for the next couple of years. All right. So next we're going to have Mark Garin talk to us a little bit about greenhouse siting. Mark, are you there?
Hi,
All
hello
right.
everyone.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Mark. I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, hello, welcome everybody. Thanks K-State for having me. As you said, my name is Mark Garn. I am the farm operations manager for Cultivate Kansas City. Been with Cultivate since 2018. Before that, I was with Kansas State Research and Extension and spent a good amount of time out at Pal Gardens as well. So kind of been around the Kansas City agriculture scene life for about the last 20 years. Also have a small farm in Raymore, Missouri as well. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and share screen here. Is that one all up and running, Carrie?
Yep, looks good.
All right. As mentioned, work for Cultivate Kansas City, and at Cultivate Kansas City, our mission is to grow food, farms, and communities in support of an equitable, healthy local food system for all. To do that, Cultivate has several programs that they operate through. One being the New Roots program, our food access team, urban farmer development, and public education. Our food access programs, you might see them a lot around farmers markets. They work in the Double Up Food Bucks program, the Senior Market Match, direct from farm donations they work through. Really big project they've been taking on these last few years is the Dot Mobile Grocer as well. You might see Dottie out on the road nowadays in Wyco. Um, this is actually last year's schedule, so it's somewhat changed, but kind of exciting for the team to get out on a weekly basis to different sites through Wyandotte County and deliver some fresh produce. The urban farmer development team is always connecting farmers with resources to make their business more sustainable. So they might be doing bulk order purchases. We just finished up our big potato operation. I think there was 9,800 pounds of seed potatoes distributed in this last week. They have also done ginger and turmeric and strawberry plants and all types of good stuff. Also, get involved with doing a lot of policy and advocacy work, access to land linking or different workshops and grant writing assistance as well. If you haven't checked out on one of our website, you can find Kansas City Farm Link. So that's going to be this is a new project in the last year, up and running with sort of connecting landowners and land seekers, and hopefully to keep farmland in production instead of turning into other developments. The New Roots program is housed at the Juniper Farm in Kansas City, Kansas. It was a joint program started with Catholic Charities of Northeast Kansas. This is a 4-year training program, so like a business incubator. There, on average, there's 14 to 16 families in training. Participants sell at farmers markets. There's a up to 150 member CSA. There's wholesale and pantry donations as well. So the farmers receive a lot of help from staff in the first year, and then step that down in consecutive years till graduation, and at that point, hopefully running their own farm. And we'll still receive some graduate support assistance. So that might be in infrastructure improvements to their property or business planning as well. As of 2024, there's been 48 program graduates from this uh, program, and up to around 80% are still farming, many of them in the Kansas City area. Part of the New Roots Farm is what we're going to be talking about some today is over on the Stowe site. Um, and we built this Diana Eisman Community Greenhouse. And that's what we're going to be talking about as we get into construction of high tunnels and greenhouses. This is that farm in KCK I mentioned. That this side of so we're looking at the north side of the street. The street divides between like the Juniper Garden side and then the Stowe Farm. Each one of these plots that you can see there are about around a quarter acre, so that's what the farmers and trainer training receive. And usually on that quarter acre, a first year farmer will average maybe $3,000 to $6,000 in sales. And usually by fourth year, you're looking at anywhere between 12, probably maxing out around 20,000 in sales. And the farmers keep all that as well. Uh, and then if we look to the south of the street, there is we're looking at the Stowe site. And I believe you can see my cursor, but this site that I'm over here where this basketball court is where we're looking at for adding a greenhouse. And why this came up is, well, for one, the greenhouse on the old Juniper side was, it was a 20 by 96, I believe, so quite compact, small. Um, as we had more and more graduates from the program, the need for the community greenhouse space also grew. So there's been a big push in the recent years to develop a newer and bigger greenhouse for the program and program graduates, as well as community members. The plot you see above has actually been the last few years have been a community garden, housing a lot of the neighbors through the apartments as well. And there's mostly always been a community garden somewhere on the site. It's just has moved a few spots here and there. So this is one of the original drawings for the site that we were looking at. See, we're trying to put in a 60 by 96 greenhouse. We are going to have some shipping containers to be retrofitted into cold storage, and there'll be a wash stand area between them. Um, so some of the things that you look at this initial plan, which then we kind of start to make adjustments to. Um, and I should point out, we're looking north to the top of the screen, and then south down here below. So right now, this is situated as east-west, and we see we have our shipping containers here. So if you think about if we're going to have doors accessing this area once you get into the site, it really doesn't make sense to have the shipping containers facing this way. We need to turn those so they can line up with the building. Um, and I'd like to talk a little bit about we are building a greenhouse here, which while a lot of the same things we discuss are relevant in terms of high tunnel, um, might want to think about in a high tunnel situation, you will be planting in your soil in the future. So the disturbance you do to that land, could be a bigger effect in your growing seasons to come than in a greenhouse setting where you're mostly going to be growing on benches. A little close up to the site, you kind of get to see what we're dealing with. It's an old basketball court. It's got cracked asphalt on it. See this hill sloping towards the asphalt, so water runs onto it. We have some standing water there, even. And then the site continues to have a slope running off towards the southeast as well. So for us, it we start to think about how this building is going to sit here, and it makes the most sense that we're going to probably want to remove that asphalt. For one thing, greenhouses on high tunnels most consistently are we're driving posts into the ground or setting posts in concrete, and the asphalt, we're either going to have to break up the asphalt just where those posts go, and then work around them with our grade, or it just makes more sense to tear it all out. So you kind of see it sitting there. It's pretty thin, got some nice bindweed growing up through it, but should pop up pretty easy once we put some machines on it as well. So we did, because we're in the city here, I saw the nice skyline in the background. We do have to work through building permits, and part of doing building permits for a project like this, you do have to have engineered plans approved. So this is one of the first drawings of the greenhouse, and some things changed along the way, as we can see, but we're looking at a 60 by 90 or 60 by 96 on here. Um, And you see the containers have switched because but see, we have a shutter right here on this plan. We actually want that to be a door. So, we're adjusting along the way. Um, but looking at this it doesn't really, there's a door there. I don't see the other door, but let's go to the next slide here. So these are the elevations like on that same site. So this is your back to our asphalt um, basketball court, just transposed over this. If you look right here on this elevation on this point, so this is our northwest point, 788. If we go down the line to our far point, we're looking at 78.6. So that's our north east point. So we've dropped 2 feet roughly from that point to that point. Down here we're at 78.6, so we have a 2 foot fall across our north-south fall. And then we have another 2 foot fall from here to here, and then that is our southeast corner, correct? So we have a 4 foot drop from our highest point corner down to our lowest point, which is quite a bit for this building. Um, so mentioning on building these structures, it's very nice to be as level as possible. That makes our job easier in the future, but every site's going to be different. Um, on a greenhouse, I'm really going to be looking for trying to get this as close to that level. A high tunnel, I would maybe have a little more leeway. I would maybe allow it to walk down a little bit. Um, but I would only allow a walk down in the length of my structure, my side to side. So because the structure is set up right here, it's east west on our length. My north and south poles, I'm going to want those to be level with each other. Like my north pole here and my south pole here, I want those to be level. And then it can walk down, some grade. That is fine. And we are going to walk this structure down a few inches just to have our gutters drain. But having yeah, I guess just making the point that we want to be level side to side, but it's okay to walk a structure down the grade. And we're going to walk it down smooth. We're not going to be going up and down, but it is okay. So with that, and then if you look back, we're also looking at these containers as we're beginning to think about what we're going to do on this site. They are mostly, their points mostly are lining up with this low point, east corner here. So after we've gotten the plans and we do some initial site measurements, we get out and we use this laser transit to check, even though off the plans our points of the building might move a little bit. Um, and let me go back real quick. Sorry, to mention one other thing here. When you're thinking about these structures, um, you want thinking about orientating them north or south or east or west. In our part of the country, you can get away with orientate them either way, but you still want to consider a few things like how it fits on your site, um, how the sun is going to track more. It's going to track lower in the south during winter, and it's going to track across an east-west layout for a longer period of time than a north-south. So we will gain more solar, we'll have more solar gain throughout our day as the sun tracks across the length of the structure, and we'll use less heat in our winter. Now, in high tunnels, and for us and the greenhouses, it tends to be, having more spring production, more early starts. So that makes more sense for me to set this east-west. Now, you also saw the site. It If we wanted to set these up north-south, we would be doing like 30-foot sections, and then we would have one to at least an additional gutter connect instead of our one gutter connect down the center. But it would also affect, and I'll point this out a little later. If we put our end walls on the north and the south wall, we have very tall. Our end walls are our tallest part, and it'll mean we'll end up working on a hillside down here to be able to install those, as well as we're gonna put our doors in our end walls rather than our sidewalls as well. So how we enter the building makes a little less sense if we run these north-south as well. The other consideration is our prevailing winds, which they do come out of the northwest more in winter, but I'm not that concerned with those because I'm usually don't have any vents open in the winter too much. Um, so during the warmer part of our warmer days, they tend to be out of the southwest, our prevailing winds. So how I vent the structure will matter. So it does make sense. I could have the vents and the fans. Um, I could have my intake vents on this west wall and then my outtake on this east. However, if I put my fans here, I would be blowing right into this washstand area and creating noise for anyone working in there and pleasant. So for us as well, it makes more sense for us to put the intake shutters on the south wall so we're not fighting that prevailing wind. And even when they're open without any fans running, we'll get some passive ventilation into the building. And then we'll put our exhaust fans on this north wall and we'll be venting so up towards the north into the drainage ditch where no one's hanging out anyways. Okay. So back in September 2023, they had a little groundbreaking and the first opening of this going to be called the Diana Eisman Community Greenhouse. Diana Eisman worked for C2FO and they wanted to do something to honor her in her memory. And so they were our kickoff donor. And then the Resurrection United Methodist Church, William Jew College, KJET Services, American Farmland Trust, H&R Block Foundation, Catholic Charities USA, and the USDA all contributed to this project. So now the fun stuff, we get into just breaking ground. So you see that asphalt, we're using a ripper to sort off a end of a tractor, start breaking that up. We also have a skid steer that we're pulling out to bust that stuff up. And we're starting to make headway, kind of flowing through there. If you ever get a chance to drive around on a skid steer, super fun and can be quite dangerous at times as well. So we had a lot of material to deal with, but we're able to move it around. Also, if you can think about these urban soils that tend to have a lot of debris and different things in them, can make grading challenging because if you're trying to get a smooth surface on the top, anything that's chunky, any rocks, any other debris, you tend to drag, and it kind of messes up your grade at times. Oh, real back quick. So a big useful tool that we're using through this is over here at the back of this tractor. You might see a box blade. Opposed to a normal blade, a box blade will grab a big chunk of soil, and then as you drag it, it will kind of lay it out evenly, and it's better for grading and smoothing out spots. So after we've gotten a lot of the asphalt removed, and you can kind of start to see what our plan is here. If you see this pile of dirt up in this corner here, is remember this was the high spot of the project, and then down here in the south uh, east is our lowest corner. So our plan has been to start digging into this hill and digging into this corner some. So we're going to grab some of the soil off this high area and bring it down to the lowest. And we are going to be cutting into this hill as well to grab some more of the soil. And we want to start making a drainage ditch on this back side. So if you think about these are very large roof structures that shed quite a bit of water during rains. We're going to have rain coming down from the upper portion of the property down this hill. We don't want it running into the greenhouse. We don't want any of the water that's shedding off the roof running back into the greenhouse. So the ideal situation is to create a pad that's elevated on all sides. Excuse me. And that so we will slope away. That's ideal. It's not always doable. It's less doable maybe in a high tunnel situation where you don't want to have this heavy machinery on the land and really uh, messing up your stuff. I did work on a project before where we did completely grade a high tunnel site, and it did ruin the structure for a good year and a half. Um, Ultimately, as years followed, we were glad to have that better drainage on the site because it's nothing worse than getting a lot of water flowing back into your structure. As well as when I talked about you can walk down the hill a little bit if you're on quite a bit of slope. The only thing to consider is if you're walking down at too tight of an angle, you could still get water shed off that roof and flowing back into the tunnel just because it's moving quite fast. So ideally, you have a raised pad on all sides. And you can manipulate that a little bit with how you set your posts. And I know in future webinars I might get into that. Even if the ground isn't level, you can set your posts level, right? And then you can do some work after the fact thing. It's just each step is makes your next step easier in this whole process. So the more close to level we get with this grade will make setting our posts and corners later easier to be level and square. And the more level and square we have those, just as we attach each piece of this structure will become easier. Just a couple fun picks. It was time for the basketball to go. Unfortunately, we would have loved to kept it in the greenhouse. It was just going to make building the structure too difficult and some of the final grades as well. Um, but safety first, so you always put a tractor under your basketball courts before you cut them. So now this picture, we're starting to see a little more final grade. As you see this yellow circle on the bottom, that's one of our corners. So you see we pushed, our corners are pushed all the way out to where this starts to slope to the street. How we actually did this, because this had a pretty good east-west orientation already with the street. We ended up pulling measurements off the street up to these two south corners and then worked off them to find our other ones going back into the hill. This spot where this yellow dot is also where it starts to slope off. So we wanted to get, and we didn't want to grade this or cut any more off this side anyways, because it's already lower than the north side. So we got up to the top of the hill as much as we could, and then we took our 60-foot measurement back to see how far into the hill we would have to go before our drainage ditch. Ultimately, we did make the decision that we were going to shorten the building and make it only 56 feet wide. Um, just because we were going to have to cut quite a bit more of this hill to be able to fit 60 feet. Um, so that's kind of how we got there with this part. But you can see that the grade, after dragging with the box blade, has started to become a nice smooth thing. We've added several feet down here. Now, I'll say we didn't add this several feet just all at once. We would spread out a thin layer, the box blade would smooth over, but then we would run over it with the tractor and the skid steer several times to pack that in as we go. You really want to pack any grade you're doing along the way in increments instead of trying to pack it all at once. You're going to end up, it's just not going to work as well for you. It won't be as good of a pack. So after we've gotten some of our grade work done, here's where I'm working on that drainage ditch some. And I actually pulled a middle buster on the tractor behind where we wanted it first, just to give you a point to work off of. And then I would have been using the skid steer bucket and a back blade on a tractor. I could put it in that ditch at an angle so I could then start creating more of a swale effect. So I want the water to be coming down the hill, kind of hit bottoms out, but then I go back up the hill from my pad to my greenhouse. So that, as I said before, like the water coming down the hill is not flowing in the greenhouse, and the water coming off the roof is not flowing in the greenhouse. This pad is not perfectly level at this point. We still have a little bit of slope through the whole property. And that reason being, we know we're going to be adding gravel on top of this as a base. So any water that does get in here, I still want to shed off the property and it would flow under the gravel there. And I know picture's a little hard to tell, like slope and such, but it's a little better picture of the drainage ditch after it's been worked on. So I said as I ran that middle buster down this line, I'm assuming you can see my cursor as well, but and then we got the blades stuck against that point going each direction so that we could go up from there and up there. We have our low point, and then we have our elevated pad. So what we've done from this point, as we think back to the elevations we looked at, we had a 4 foot drop, which is just way too much for this building to be constructed on. So we had a 4 foot drop from here to here. Now what we have is about a 6 to 8 inch drop from our west end to our east end. I'm going to speed up just a little bit here as we get into some of the final pictures. Um, Something I didn't mention earlier, if you see back here, this was a construction entrance, but this is planned from those engineering plans from before. If you kind of saw how the greenhouse was going to sit, it's really blurry, but there's a grade stake right here, which is kind of some of our corners. And but you got to have an entrance for. There's going to be a lot of things coming onto the site. So this is actually 3 inch rock here. Part of it is to make sure we can still have access to the site when we're still getting rains, but it's also required just to catch any mud coming off tires so that it doesn't get pulled into the street. And you can actually accrue fines if you're dragging too much mud into the street. So having a good entrance to the project you're working in these city environments is crucial. I like to start getting some gravel down early in the process here, even though we are going to be still drilling holes in the future just to keep some of the mud down. That being said, like this type of work, ideally, if you can do it, is best done, in the drier months. So you're talking about in the fall, late summer, fall. You're just gonna have a lot easier time not dealing with the mud. Here's where we're starting to dig our footings for the shipping containers going to go in. So some of this is project planning. We want to build a greenhouse, but we would not be able to access this part of the site once the greenhouse building is up. So we need to do this first. If you see this little pad, if you can see this pad of gravel right here that I'm circling, that is actually our finished grade we're looking for. So you kind of and you can have grade stakes, or you can pop things like this that you take with your transit to know where you're trying to end up. Um, and something about digging foundations and posts. If you do a lot of grade work that you're packing, you still need to make sure that you get into original soil with your foundation parts. You're not going to want to just pop some concrete onto soil that you've packed because you're not, unless it sits there for quite a while, you're never going to get it as compact as what the original soil was. So you actually need to dig, you might have to dig deeper past your whatever. So as I said, we packed 4 feet down on this one end. We had to get through that 4 feet before we got into actual better soil to make sure our pads wouldn't our concrete blocks wouldn't sink. Um, to get into building permits, and if you're involved at all setting some shipping containers, you're required to have some pretty big blocks that they're going to go on. Um, but part of that planning was see with some of our grade, we don't have ultimately we want these to line up level with each other because we want these containers to sit level and we want them to line up with the building as well. So all that works together, made ourselves easier in the end. A lot of concrete going in there. These cages were actually welded together, found this size, they weren't able to hold together long term with just ties. They ended up having to be welded. So these shipping containers, which are really handy to use, but they need 120 feet of straight driveway to be able to drop off. So part of that planning, going in ahead of time, having access to the site. You see, we got a nice level pad going in, and we'll be able to go right into our building. So kind of speed up some of the finished things. What I want to point out here, even though you're going to talk about corner posts later in another webinar, um, so see, we did not get our grade all the way up on this end, but we, utilize these sonotube so our finished concrete does end up at our finished grade, and knowing that we're going to be bringing gravel in as well. So you don't have to get absolutely perfect. You can fix things as you go. It's just the same notion as you get closer to as perfect on each step makes your next step easier. Kind of a picture more into our finished ditch. So you see now we have good drainage coming down. It's a little hard to tell, but this ground does slope back up to the building, and now then our footprint of our slope up is just covered with gravel, and then our ditch with the roof of our greenhouse will drain off into the ditch. The roof from the other structure will drain off and will move water off the site instead of coming into the buildings. We added a culvert so we could access the top part. These are a little more farther along in the process, but I just want to kind of point out this corner here and see how far we drop off once we get past this point. So it's a tight um, site to fit this structure. Uh, and the concrete under this corner is probably like 7 feet deep because we had to go through that 4 feet and then 3 more feet into stable ground. Reason I want to show this picture is to talk about some of that early site discussion of if we were going to place it north or south or east or west. We wanted east or west for one reason, just to have the more solar gain. We also wanted the prevailing winds to be coming and hitting our vents from the south. But if I mentioned before, if we wanted to put end walls on these north and south and have our gutters running the opposite way, these are quite tall. I think this is 16 feet up here. And if we were trying to do this project on that hillside of that south, it would have been quite dangerous, quite difficult. So thinking that, and as we were grading, we wanted to supply enough of ourselves of a footprint around the structure that you have to do all this work. You got to be able to get the plastic up here and work on this structure and get wiggle wire in as long on the sides. So kind of the more difficult sides of the building to work on, we made shorter and put our tallest parts on spots we could access better. As well as we had to plan for, so this is that construction entrance from the very beginning. So knowing that a fence gate would end up coming here, so we could add access to the building, we would have our main door on this side as well. So we want to be able to flow in there. If we had put the end walls on this side, it would have been a little more awkward coming up this hill and into the building as well. Um, Something I forgot to mention before was some of the utility access. The main gas line runs is down in the street, and when you get into gas lines, say it has to come off a 90-degree straight into the building. It has to come to a corner of a building or on the side. So thinking about where we wanted our utilities to come in, were part of like how this corner would hit. We didn't want it to be like interfering with this road or this structure because the gas line was going to come straight in here and then it sits on this corner, which made the most sense for then from that point entering the building and going to our heaters. Electrical came through the air onto a pole on the backside. So we didn't have to really worry about the underground access for electrical. Um, but it is something you have to th consider about how you're placing your building and how you're going to get those utilities there. So kind of beginning to end, we had a nice aerial shot with our asphalt basketball court, and now it's a greenhouse and wash stand. Some of the key takeaways I like you to think about are like analyze your site elevations, how the structure will fit on the site, consider where your utilities are coming from, where your access will be, how you're going to get into the building. Think about if you're greenhouse rather than high tunnel, think about those things like the exhaust fans. We didn't want to put the exhaust fans right up against the neighbors' apartments and annoy them all night. Um, we wanted to put them in, but it also worked out that they matched up with our prevailing winds to put them on the north side there. A raised pad where water sheds away from the structure on all sides is ideal. As mentioned at our 39th parallel, high tunnels really can orient north-south and east-west, but that east-west orientation is going to give you the most solar gain for winter and early spring growth. When you have high tunnels that have drop-down sides, you can get really good ventilation by placing the structure north and south. Kind of have to just think about what works best on your property, your site, and what you want to, and what your growing goals are. Um, it's okay to walk a structure down a hill. I think you could probably find examples out there of structures walking down dramatic hills, but definitely want to keep that side to side level. You can fix some of that side to side level by having a level hip board and a baseboard that follows the ground. The only thing you'll discover in that situation is it will affect if you're using drop down sides, it will affect how those function if you're working on a different measurement as you move throughout the structure. And each step in the construction process has the capacity to make the next step easier or harder. So the more level you are, the more square you are. Um, as you do each step, it makes those things pop together. It's nothing better than picking up a big truss of metal that's 30 feet wide and having it just slide on its points nice and easy without too much work from everyone else. And now we can open up, have some time for questions.
All right. Thank you, Mark. That was really informational, really helpful. It's nice to see all those pictures. Looks like the greenhouse has turned out pretty well. So, for those of you that have questions, please just go ahead and put them into the chat. One question I had for you, Mark, as I was watching the elevation differences from one corner to the other. So you basically just had to shift all that soil or dirt, I guess in this case, from that one corner to the other. Do you actually go through the process of like calculating how much soil you have to move, or could you talk a little bit about the process of like how you figured out how much soil you would need to move in order to make it all fit.
Oh gosh, I think we did some math way back then. It's just been a while, getting into sort of yeah, knowing. I think when we looked at it, it was as we got about halfway through the structure, we started to see that it sort of leveled off. So it kind of calculated that area and got some cubic feet measurements of like we need about this much cubic feet. I don't have those numbers directly off my head, but we did a little bit of that. Um, More, and then a lot of what we did was taking additional transit elevation measurements along the way. So we would dig some out, we'd move some over, pack it in, and then get back on the level, the transit, and take a measurement and see where at. And some of that's looking at our grade stakes along the way as well that we have in the ground, telling us how close we're getting to where we want. It's just sometimes the grade stake gets knocked over and lost, and you kind of just have to reset. Um,
So cool. So basically, you're just sort of measuring it as you go, and once you get it more or less where you want it, where it's level, then that's where you end up.
yeah. So we marked each corner before we started, and with the elevations on there, which we were trying to get to, and then work towards that. Now, in the case of that, we were actually dropping one of the corners a little lower. So some of that initial digging is that, all right, this is where we want to start, and then moved it to that other corner. I actually did look at just the ability to bring soil in. It was so expensive and hard to find, and it just made more sense for us to move the soil around a bit. Now, if this was a high tunnel, I would try to do a lot to not put so much heavy machinery through the entire structure and really ruin the structure as I went. Um, Kind of just depends on the site you have and what you got to work with.
Right. And you definitely want to maintain a level of topsoil or a layer of topsoil with a high tunnel, whereas with the greenhouse, it doesn't matter if it's sitting
Yes,
on clay, right?
right.
And then that laser transit, where do you find those? And can you give us a quick description of sort of how you use it?
So, so you can rent transits at any of the places like Bledsoe's, United Rental. Um, you can purchase like manual ones, excuse me, for not too much, a couple $100. Like a manual one, you kind of just look through like a telescope, and then there's a person on the other side with a measuring stick. Um, and you pick one point, you look through, and you'll see, and you'll record that point of measurement. It might be like 5 and 4/8 or whatever. And then if you go to a different point and you look forward, you look through and you hit that stick, it will give you a different measurement. It might be like 7 5/8. So that point is now 2 inches lower than the first point I took at. The laser ones kind of just do that for you. You don't have to do the math. It's like I set one spot, I on the stick is a receiver that receives that laser. It will start beeping when it is at the height. And then if I go to any other spot, I'll either raise that stick up and down until the laser hits it and starts beeping. And then I can kind of figure my math from there. I believe Carrie just put in the chat actually, if you visit that site, you can go through and see more of the complete build. Well,
Yeah, I was looking through, there's a bunch of nice pictures in there. Great. Are there any other questions from the audience?
see, it says, can you tell us something like this maybe on a smaller scale will cost? So I can tell you, like, it depends what you're doing, I guess. High tunnels are cheaper than greenhouses. They tend to have more tech screws and less bolts. Greenhouses tend to have more bolts, plus you're looking at all your utilities that you may be getting into. When we purchased this structure, it was from Mass Produce. We purchased it from Mass Produce, and like a Zimmerman high tunnel structure. It came with all the heaters and the fans, the exhaust fans, the shutters, and all the materials to get. to put it up. And it was about $45,000. So that's 56 by 96. Um, when I built a high tunnel at my house, I think I haven't looked at recent prices, but materials for my high tunnel were around $10,000. Now I did all the construction myself, so you say that it kind of depends if you have to pay someone. Now I didn't add utilities, I didn't add other structures. It's just a passive high tunnel. So got it done about 10,000 along with I made some additional purchases like just renting a few machines to pound posts in or set concrete, but probably 10 to 12,000. But that was several years ago. Not completely up to date on current prices though.
Unfortunately, they're not going down.
Yeah, I imagine metal's probably quite a bit more these days.
Everything's just getting outlandish, unfortunately. All righty. Well, thanks, Mark, for joining us today at the webinar. I'm not seeing any other question. Oh, there is one other question. Sorry. So it says you used raised pad and drainage ditch for water mitigation. Did you consider other methods like a French drain or a rain garden?
Yes, it definitely considered, and wouldn't say that it can't still be added. It's kind of just our initial um, sort of site grade, get it functioning, and some of it comes down to just what staff we have on site and how much we can maintain. Um, and this ditch is kind of a berm and swale, kind of functions like a French drain. Just it doesn't have a pipe down the middle. It's more just loose. But so we just have some cover crops seeded through that hillside, and we'll mow it down such. But the high tunnel at my house kind of was a similar thing with which was a slope down going down a hill and a slope. Um, Hitting the tunnel. And in that situation, I didn't want to disturb the soil as much. So I did do a French drain before it hit the structure itself, because I was able to do more work on that and less work on my pad.
Great, thanks. And there was sort of a follow-up. They thought if you wondered it might be too much water for those other methods to make sense.
It possible. Some of this we're trying to get the water to move out. I mean, when we get like these large 6-inch rains, there's so much water coming off that roof, hitting that ditch. I'm trying to move a lot of it out quick. It'd be nice to slow it down through some things. It's just, yeah, we think about them, do them, and maybe we'll do it eventually.
Put the rain garden in one of the old sand bunkers there. So for those of you, at some point I visited with Mark up there at the site, and apparently they figured out, and this is part of the fun in working in urban agriculture, that I guess that spot must have had a golf course on it before because there was this giant like bubble of sand that
Yeah,
we that Mark unearthed sort of over there by those shipping containers. So maybe that's where you can put your
full,
rain garden.
full of golf balls as well.
Alrighty. Well, it looks
Well,
like all the questions have been answered. So thanks again for joining us today, Mark, and thanks to everybody that joined the webinar. We have been recording these, so we'll archive them on the Growing Growers YouTube channel. So please take a look for them there. If you know anybody else that's interested in this kind of information, it's a good place to access it. And we don't have our next webinar scheduled yet, so keep an eye out for that. I suspect now that we're gearing up into the growing season, we'll probably wait until later in late summer or fall before we have our next one. All right. Thanks to Mark again, and everybody have a great
thank you.